All right, obviously I overran myself for 30 minutes. If you're still putting up with me, this is part 2 or this is the second half attached to the first half. We'll see how it works. So finally there are the governor races. I think there were 7 races that flipped to the Democrats in the governorship. That is significant. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time with it. Probably the most notable one is that apparently Tony Evers flipped on Scott Walker, the incumbent Republican in Wisconsin. Tony Evers, the Democrat, is ahead by about 30,000 votes. And out of 2.5 million, that is a 1% margin, which is very, very close. But it's pretty clear that flipped. Mike DeWine, held in Ohio, replaced Goofball Kasich, and that was kind of surprising. Held by 4 points over his competition, which was Richard Cordray, the Democrat. So Mike DeWine holds as a Republican in Ohio. Let's see what else. Nevada, I think, flipped. Adam Laxalt lost, the Republican. Steve Sisolak, the Democrat, won by about 40,000 votes. And again, it's very close. There's 900,000 votes and there are 40,000 votes difference. That's 20,000 people changed their mind. That was a different election. It's pretty incredible. The 3 or 4 most notable ones in Texas, Greg Abbott, the Republican, very handily won against Lupe Valdez, and that's probably not at all a surprise, but in a state where the Cruz and O'Rourke thing was going on, it could have made some difference. Obviously, there is a huge, why does the word huge make more difference now with President Trump in office? You can't use huge anymore, right? The other very, very big race had to do with Ron DeSantis and Andrew Gillum in Florida. And Gillum was leading all of the polls. I think the Project Veritas may have made some difference. It was a tightly contested race. Gillum held his own county where he had been the mayor, I think. And of course the southeast corner, Broward, Palm Beach, and Miami-Dade counties, those 3 counties all went heavily Democratic. The areas around Orlando and what's the one on the west? The 2 big cities anyway, I'll think about it in a minute. Both went Democratic. The rest of the state went Republican. The Panhandle went Republican. It was very, very close. We're talking about less than 1% margin between the two. There are 55,000 votes between them out of 8 million. 8 million total votes, and the Republican wins by 55,000 votes. So it's incredibly close. Now, the one that's still floating, and it's only floating because of 2 reasons. The one that's still floating is the one that was the darling of the mainstream media, which is the Georgia race, number 1. So it's the darling, and nobody wants to let go of the darling yet. And number 2, the Democratic challenger, the Democratic opponent, has not conceded, and she is sure she's going to squeeze. She is treating it like there's still a campaign going on and that they'll squeeze more votes out somewhere, and so she's not willing to concede. In this situation in Georgia, which is it's a big state, there are almost 3.9 million votes, which is, it's a lot of votes. And it is a very tightly contested race. There's less than 2 points between them. There are less than 2. Brian Kemp is the Republican, and Stacey Abrams, the admittedly progressive, left-leaning black woman who would have been the first black female to be a governor, I think. And as I say, was the darling of everybody. She was a flag burner. In case you, now at her much younger age, did I do something stupid when I was younger? Yeah, I must have, right? Somebody will remember some really, really stupid thing I did, and there were lots. But she also made comments during her campaign that illegals should vote too. She thought that anybody ought to vote, and there's no reason why they shouldn't vote. So, which is absolutely insane. I mean, either you don't know enough about law to be a governor, in which case you shouldn't be running, or you do know enough about law to be the governor and you are blatantly and obviously engaging and promoting and encouraging illegal activity. Which one is it? You're either really, really stupid or criminally devious. Which one? So I think she's probably more likely criminally devious. So this race anyway is very close. I think she may either request a recount or simply cry and complain till the mainstream media raises the howl about it. But I think she clearly lost, and it was a very close race. So you have two races in the Southeast, one in Florida for governor that is very close and that came an eyelash from having a pretty radical Democrat as the governor, and in Georgia, a clearly unqualified person as governor in Georgia that would have been transformational. Now you also have, and not to make it sound like I am picking on people who are black, because both of those Democratic candidates for governor were black. I am really disappointed in the House that in Utah, the person who happens to also be black, just so that I can show you the balance, Mia Love, who is not particularly a Trump fan, but I think she's a second or third term Republican, became the only Republican casualty in Utah. And she did so to the tune of about 4,700 votes out of 180,000 votes. And in a state where Willard Mittens Romney won by, let's see, what did he win by? 36 points. He had a 31-point margin. I got it wrong. Willard Mittens won by a huge margin, and he wins the Jockstrap McStain Award for most likely to succeed No Name McCain. And he will be, I predict, a Republican thorn in the side of President Trump. He is a person who obviously has insecurities about the fact that he didn't win. Is miffed that he didn't win, is certain that he should have been the president and would have been a better president than President Trump. All of those things are true, and he also happens to be a very dark component of the whole Bush evil cabal. So is it better that he's there? I guess, yeah. It's better that he's there. Does he fill a slot that would have been thoroughly a Schumer Democrat following? Yes. Is he going to vote with the Republicans most of the time? Yes. Is he not going to be problematic? Well, he might at times, and he certainly is going to get out on the steps and tell you how smart he is and how he would be doing it lots better if he were president, because that's what he really wants. And I'm not happy that Willard Mittens Romney is the Republican senator in Utah. My God almighty, you could have done better, but he is a very high-profile guy that would have been hard to beat in the primary, and was not. I mean, wasn't even close in the primary. So we're stuck with Willard Mittens, We're stuck with the senator from Murkowski from Alaska. We've got Susan Collins that can't decide where she is in Maine. And but there is a margin of 3 or 4, and it takes all of them to go sideways to screw stuff up at this point. So whereas before it was not screwed up all the time, now it takes a bunch of them, a handful of Republicans going crazy to mess it up. It will be more Republican, if only marginally. It will be very difficult for Willard Mittens to spend any time in Utah if he votes against President Trump's Supreme Court nominees. They'll run him out. Good for them, they'll run him out. Unfortunately, you can't impeach and remove a seated senator, and believe me, I looked into that with respect to No Name McCain. So there is the full election report. I had looked at doing it online last night. I couldn't get enough bandwidth to actively work while I was working with you guys, so I didn't. And of course, by the time there came for full reporting, there was nothing to report but boo-hoo. So where are we? Well, we are where we are, and it looks like they've decided a couple more seats for the Republicans. We still have 10 seats sticking out in the House, and that would be the total. There's a runoff Senate race for the special election in Mississippi. That Senate special election is Cindy Hyde-Smith, the Republican, against Mike Espy, the Democrat. The two of them polled within 8,000 votes, 7,500 votes of each other. They each got about 41% of the vote. The other Republican candidate, and I don't know how it is that Mississippi ends up with 2 Republicans, but is Chris McDaniel. And he got 16% of the vote. There were people that wrote to me from Mississippi that said McDaniel would have been the good Republican candidate, and Cindy Hyde-Smith is not really a Republican, is a rhino, and won't be the best. But will she be better than Espy? I guess you folks in Mississippi will have to tell us, won't you? That's the report from me. It's the last of the political reports I'm going to give. This is part 2. If you liked all of this, give me a thumbs up. I mean, just to give you an idea, this is what I go through to find out who's likely to win the Senate. It takes some time. I'm not trying to whine at you at all, but it is what it takes to know what the hell you're talking about, kind of, sort of, in order to make sense of all of this. This is the report stuff I did, for instance, for last night, that would have been of interest, all the races, governor, House, and Senate, stuff that I went through to see where we ended up. And I think that's all I have to say about it. Goodness, we will need to help President Trump. Now, let me give you my final thought and comment for whatever it's worth. And that is this. There is going to be a lot of craziness going on over this next 2 years. There's no doubt about it. And I think these Democrats in the House are just going to be dancing with tutus the whole time, making crazy noise, standing out on the steps, talking about how important they are. There are going to be a half dozen of them, both in the House and Senate, that are going to be scrambling to be president. There is going to be, craziness with respect to investigations, investments of Trump, getting a hold of his tax records, trying to check him out with respect to Mueller, the whole Russian probe thing, his investments in foreign countries, whether that or not that's helping his little dinky foundation, which is in no respect like the Clinton Foundation. His other expenses and income, the whole campaign business, they're going to try to pin him down in every way they can. They're going to double check him, second check him on international stuff. They are going to not help him with that, with the border wall and the rest of that. We're not going to get financing for the border wall. Trump is going to have to do two things. One is find space in the military budget for it, number one. And number two, I think Trump can do some, what he did is he's putting razor wire up. I think there are ways to put temporary, rows of temporary enforcements in those places. I think if they had monitors and drones and razor wire and trenches, and you had it set up so that it automatically triggered if any of that razor wire was cut, and you had a momentary response team that was stationed every 50 miles or so that within 5-10 minutes they could be in place, 20 minutes they could be in place with helicopters and round folks up. And if there's no catch and release, there can't be any catch and release. Nobody can get released, period. And anybody that is of military age or disruptive age or of potentially criminal conduct should be locked up for the entire time. No questions asked, no release. And for the releasees, there should be ankle bracelets, and people should be given a choice. If you're going to be released, then you have to have an ankle bracelet, and basically you're on parole. You have to check in on a weekly basis. You have to let us know where you are. You have to have a temporary social security number so that if you are in fact working, that you do it. You have to verify what your source of income is and how you are maintaining yourself financially while you're here, so you're not doing illegal employment. You've got the ankle bracelet on, you've got the weekly reports, and you're turning in your tax returns on a regular basis and maintaining care and custody of your children if you're released. I mean, we need to squeeze in on this in a way that it absolutely does not have anybody floating in this country that doesn't belong here, and then gradually squeeze the rest of them. And if we're going to grant amnesty to some, well, oh well, let's do it, but no more. And some of my liberal friends say, well, gee, all these people in all these other countries are having trouble, and they're financially hardship, and I'm a second or third generation immigrant and everything. And I say, yeah, here's the deal. And I'm going to talk about this at length because it's a very, very important concept. We have people that make emotional decisions first and then follow with a logical pathway, or not. And we have people who make logical decisions and then try to find their humanity or not after they make rational, logical decisions. And somewhere in the middle is where it would be ideal that we would be, both compassionate and rational. But here's the problem with it. And this is a problem that, forgive me for saying this, more females have than males. And I don't mean that in denigration of the process, but I have become more painfully aware of it as we have progressed through this election and through the Kavanaugh decision and others. And that was that there is this affectation, this assimilation of an emotional response, which is treated as a decision, which is not necessarily ever followed by a logical conclusion. And the problem with it is, in the Kavanaugh case, was that people made an emotional decision based upon believing her, or about Me Too, or about someone being left behind, or about someone being abused, and the fact that sexual abuse is still rampant, and a lot of that's true, and then said, all right, on that basis I decide this is how I look at it. And there were people on the other side that said, well, it didn't make logical, rational sense. Likewise, where we have the immigrant process, and I will parallel those two. They're very much in parallel. We have people that say we can't let anybody in on the so-called logical, rational side, and also from an emotional perspective. And we have people that say we should be more humanitarian, we should have open borders, we should allow anybody that comes in here wants to. And what I'm going to say to you is, and I think this is true for our homes and for our charitable contributions, as well as for how we look at things in a humanitarian way. What I would say to the liberals who want to let anybody in is, are you going to give all your money away? Why does that parallel make sense? Well, let's say I have a budget of household income, let's call it $50,000. If we are going to look at the nation the way we look at our own budget, then the person who has a $50,000 income would be willing to say, that wants to have open borders, that wants to have sanctuary cities, would be willing to say, well, look, I have my spouse and 2 children, and but I'm making $50,000, and obviously people in other parts of the country or the other parts of the world, I should be willing to let them in and to share that with me. Does that mean they share the household space? Well, maybe. And maybe. Do you have a basement available, garage available? Yeah, whatever. But it also means that you take that $50,000 of income and you say how much you're willing to share and distribute it, because on a national basis, that's exactly what we're doing. And if you are comfortably living above your means and you're willing to spend $5,000 helping somebody else out, and you're willing to do that, I say, great, then spend 10% of our national income doing exactly the same thing. If, on the other hand, one of your kids is going without shoes and you don't have jackets for this year, and you're having to scrimp on your food, and you don't have health insurance, then are you going to provide $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 of your $50,000 for the benefit of somebody else that when you cannot afford your own household? How does that compare to our national situation? Folks, we have veterans that are living in the street. We have veterans that can't get health care. We have veterans that are not getting necessary medical care. And let's just go to them. If we have our household of 50,000 people and that veteran comes to the door, are you going to give him $5,000 versus the illegal that crossed the border? Who are you going to take care of, and who are you going to take care of first? And if you're only going to take care of illegals versus veterans, who comes first? And why is it that we make an emotional decision not based upon how much we have to spend or how much is available? We make an emotional decision to help others, to add new people to our mix when we're not taking care of the ones that we already are obligated and should be caring for. Why is it that we're doing that? We have single mothers living on a string. We have people with below level incomes raising families. We have people unable to afford schooling. We have college kids that are paying huge college debts that are not being covered. There are inadequate subsidies for those. And we have $1 trillion of student loans outstanding. And yet we can still afford $100 billion a year for illegals. A third, something like 30% of the people that are in jail are illegals. Much of the crime is committed by illegals. The drug trafficking, the sex trafficking, the gun trafficking that is coming into this country is largely caused by illegals. And the other part about this, and this is the part that's hard for a lot of people to understand economically, but the truth of the matter is, and this has been true for decades, is if you put 10 million people or 20 million people into the workforce that are willing to work under the radar and for below minimum wages or for minimum wages and no benefits, no Social Security, no workman's compensation, no set aside, no health care, no vacation, no off time, and you put them into the same mix, whether they're in the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, agriculture, farming, construction stuff, road work, brickwork, landscaping and gardening and that kind of thing, you put them into the mix and you say, well, gee, Americans don't want to do those jobs. No, that's not it. Americans don't want to do those jobs for $7 an hour. They want to do them for $15 an hour. And here's the problem with it is that you take those $15 an hour people and put them in a choice between making $7 an hour illegally and having a lawsuit and the employer won't hire them, or of being on unemployment. And what they do is that they go in and compete with other people in that $12 or $15 range, and it pulls all of the wages down. So from a macroeconomic standpoint, having illegals in this country, if you're making wages, if you are not a salary person, and for a lot of purposes, if you're working by the hour, having illegals in this country has pulled your wages down by $2 to $4 an hour. And we have a middle class now that is working at minimum wages, many of them attempting to pay 60, 70, 80% of their income for housing, going without health care, not having $400. We have half of our population unable to come up with $400 cash to fix their car. And yet we're going to add more people and bring all of these wages down another 10%. You can raise the minimum wage all you want. What you're going to do is end up with more people unemployed or on welfare or subsidized or working illegally and not following on the process. So what I'm saying about the emotional versus financially responsible logical side is, yeah, go ahead and be a contributor, be generous, be helpful, provide benefits to people, but do it within your budget. And only do it after you've taken care of your own personal obligations. So on the personal obligation side, let's take care of the low income, the single parents, the inadequate education, the school, college loans and the rest of that. Let's look into all of those things. Let's balance our health care problem. Let's come up with benefits for ongoing health care. And then if we have money left over, let's spend some of the $100 billion we're spending to provide benefits for illegals that we are not doing budgetarily and rationally and logically now. That's what I would say. And if you want to budget $100 billion for illegals in this country, and you want to bring them into the green card benefits, and you want to keep track of who they are and the rest of that, then great, do it. Otherwise, let's remove that, because it is a hidden budgetary downside in a situation where we have limited funds. And I would rather that we spent some portion of that $100 billion helping Hondurans and Guatemalans and Venezuelans in their own country, which we are already doing, but to spend some more of it, than having them cross the borders and totally destroy our own economy and lots of other things. So that's the downside and the outside and the apparent offset of this election. And if it doesn't get fixed in the next 2 years, folks, it's only going to get worse. So the benefit of this, as a final comment, is that with the House fully in the control of the Democrats, it may very well be that the craziness on the Democratic side, and there is some, the craziness is going to show. And that people who voted for those Democrats thinking they were going to offset the flamboyance and irregular political manifestations of President Trump are going to be surprised to find out that what they voted for is a lot crazier than the things that they didn't like about President Trump. And maybe in 2020, we will gain the benefit of that from having seen that craziness fully manifested should not continue, and that that President Trump will win, and that more of the people who support him will win in 2020 in a presidential year. That's the potential upside of it, hard as it is. It's going to be a very crazy, a very strange, and quite intriguing 2 years to watch. Thank you so much for watching. I've gone on for 60 minutes now. This takes care of the whole process, and I hope you have in some fashion enjoyed it. Thumbs up if you will. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you will. Hit the bell. Thanks so much.